Hello and welcome back. So I saw a bunch of other booktubers doing this, so I figured I would hop on the trend and do my end of the year book tag. Since it's hard to believe that there's only a month and a half left of 2024, which has probably been my best reading year I've had just on numbers alone and 5 stars that I've read, I figured I would do the tag that was originally created by Ariel Bassett and talk about what my plans are for the end of the year and transitioning into next year. So let's dive in. In my handy dandy notebook here, I wrote down the 6 different questions that are usually attributed with the tag. So we'll go through each of the questions, answering things, and probably throwing in a few other items. The first question from this tag is, are there any books that you started and need to finish before the end of the year? If I'm not enjoying something and it's not for like a book club or for a video idea, I'm just gonna scrap the book. But the one book that I seem to always be starting and never being able to finish is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and I put this on like my 24 books to read in 2024. I got over halfway into it, like read 150 pages on one flight when I was coming back from a trip with my friends, and I was completely sucked into the story, and then I hit a little bit of a summer reading slump and never continued it. If you don't know what Mistborn is, this is a story by Brandon Sanderson where we follow our main character Vin and our other main character Kelser, and what Vin is known as a Mistborn, and that's someone who can manipulate metals into like specific powers, and it's called like allomancy. So the magic system, very cool, easily defined very well in this book. Like they almost dive into the rules before the plot gets moving, so there's really good foundation, you know what's gonna happen. This book is part of Brandon Sanderson's like larger like universe, which is the Cosmere, and there are 3 books in this trilogy. I only own this one, and it was gifted to me by a friend many moons ago, and he's been dying for me to read it, and I've had another friend who's been dying for me to read it. I just want to finish it at this point because it's not that I haven't been enjoying this, it's just I keep putting it down because for whatever reason, like when my brain is not wanting to read fantasy, I really don't want to read fantasy. But Mistborn is the one that I'm saying for this question. It is the only book that I like started and feel like I have to finish, or else I will be very upset with myself. Second question is, do you have an autumnal read to transition into the end of the year? So I have 2 books that I'm considering for this. One, I'm about 90 pages in right now, and I took the cover off, but this is the book of the month cover of Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, and I really do like this book so far. The writing in it is very like seductive, and it's like oozing with different like imagery, sensory, those sorts of like ways of introducing people and the world. I would say the magic is on the lighter side, so I wouldn't consider this like a fantasy book per se, but that's kind of like what it's being marketed as. If you don't know The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, it's about the flower bride, and then there's the bridegroom, who's one of our main characters, and then we also get a look into a character from the flower bride's past named Azure. And basically throughout this story, the groom is realizing he doesn't know anything about his bride, and one of her stipulations during their marriage was that he won't ask about her past. One of her relatives becomes very ill, and she has to go back to her childhood home and face a lot of her past and bring up the past to this husband who doesn't know much of the past. This is supposed to be like a gothic fairy tale, and it definitely reads like that. The story is also set up in a way where it's like referencing a fairy tale in it too, so it's kind of meta in that way, but I like it. And a lot of the imagery is related to like fruit or like consumable things from the world, which I really like. I want to keep going with this book. Like I said, I'm only like 90 pages in, but I've been enjoying it. The writing is really solid. I'm just interested to have more of the plot threads unfolding. So the other book that I would say is a good transitional book is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I've been dying to read this book for so long because people keep talking about that and the sequel, but I've heard some people say to read this in the winter rather than the fall, or like on the cusp of fall going into winter, because like while it's got like all this beautiful like foliage and whatnot on the cover. It's actually taking place in more of like a remote, like winter-esque village. So I'm kind of okay with, you know, reading this in November. But if you don't know what Emily Wilde's encyclopedia is about, it's about the aforementioned Emily Wilde, and she is building the first ever encyclopedia of the Fae. So she's going to this remote village with one of her like academic nemesis and colleagues by the name of Wendell, and she's learning more about the Fae people and documenting it in the first encyclopedia. It's also a little bit of like a romance mixed with fantasy. It's supposed to be just like a fun time. It's more on the cozy side, not super high stakes, but the world is continuing to expand with the sequels and whatnot that are coming, and I think there are more books on the way too. But I definitely want to get to this one some point in this transition period of fall to winter. So Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is the other one. Question 3 is there a new release that you're still waiting on? So one thing that I did realize while I was trying to prep for this prompt is that not a lot of books get released in December at the end of the year. I feel like that's a weird release period when everyone's trying to wrap up their end of the year tags. Like the Goodreads Choice Awards are like coming out and they have to like roll over. There are a bunch of reasons why it's like strange to think about that. But the one book that did kind of catch my eye, other than I know there's a Brandon Sanderson book that's coming out, but I'm so not caught up on all of the Cosmere things to even speak about that. Other one that interests me is Private Rights by Julia Armfield. Julia Armfield wrote Our Wives Under the Sea, which I read earlier this year for a book club, and I thought it was okay, but the discussion that I had with my book club just like spoke to my soul and made me appreciate the book so much more, because she writes more of like a literary type horror book where it's more about like the emotions rather than like the shock factor. Private Rights is supposed to be kind of like another grief story, and this is about like a couple of sisters who are getting together after their father has passed away, and you know, they're distributing out the things from his will. That's all I really know about it. I'm assuming it's gonna be another literary depiction of grief, and I hope it's as well written as Our Wives Under the Sea is, but I hope it's a little bit more you know, cohesive than that novel was. I feel like it was all over the place. Maybe if I gave it another read, I would appreciate it more, but I am still excited to see, because Our Wives was her debut, so I want to see what a little bit more time will bring from this author. Question number 4 is, what are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? Okay, so for this one, of course, there's a ton of books that I want to read by the end of the year, but I'm picking 3 very specific books, and I will give very specific reasons as to why. The first book that I'm going to go over is like top priority that I do want to read, and that's Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. So if you don't know, this story is a dystopian novel that was written like decades ago by Octavia Butler, and the year that it's critiquing, like the future year that it's critiquing, is 2024. Which, like, if I don't read this in 2024, that's such a missed opportunity. So I really need to get to it. That's all I really know is like a sci-fi book. It's a critique on humanity, a dystopian. There's like a bunch of like political issues going on. Like the back says that there's global climate change and economic crisis and like social chaos. I feel like this could still be something super relatable to now, and I want to see what she was able to predict, you know? I'm excited about this one. This is definitely like a must read, and hopefully I can like vlog the experience or something, because I think that would just be really cool. Like, I want to tab this book. I've had it for so long. The second book that I want to read by the end of the year is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So I've had Piranesi on my radar for like 2 years now, and I wrote it down as one of like the books that I need to read in 2024, like the 24 to read in 2024, which is a hefty list, but I've done a pretty decent job of getting through it. Piranesi is like somewhat Greek mythology mixed with like literary fiction, and we're following this character by the name of Piranesi, and he's put in like this house, and the house is like endless from what I'm gathering, and it's trying to unravel the mystery of what's going on in this house and like who else is there. That's all I really know about it. I've heard that it's best to go in blind with this one, but the writing is show-stopping. I think there are like letters, or it's like told in some kind of format like that. And it's pretty short. Like, I think it's only like 200 some pages, which like could read that in a day realistically. This book, I know so many people who have loved this book and they give it 5 stars, and I want to be one of those people. So I really want to read this, and hopefully I will. We'll see. The third book that I'm going to loop into this category is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. The reason why I want to read Tress so badly is because it's a standalone book, first off, and I think if I bite into this one, it'll give me back that like taste and need to get into fantasy a bit more. Because I've looked at the books that I've read this year and I've really been shifting away from fantasy. And I always say that I like primarily read fantasy, which is like slowly becoming not true. And that's kind of sad to me. Like, yes, I love literary fiction books and I love like horror and romance, but like fantasy was always the thing that I would like say is my favorite. And I feel like I've been pushing it off because I'm intimidated, or I feel like I don't have the attention span. And I think that's just a bunch of bullcrap, because even if I read less, I want to read quality books that I am enjoying. Even if fantasy books take a little bit more time, I want to get back into that. But I think that Tress of the Emerald Sea would be a good way to kind of bring me back into the fantasy mood. This book follows our main character Tress, and she is going on a mission to save the guy that she loves, crossing like a very treacherous sea that's like a bunch of spores. Like, the magic or like danger of this world is spores, so they like descend from up above, and if they hit water of any kind, they like, you know, become poisonous or something. So it's kind of more high stakes without being like an epic fantasy, and I think that would be a good thing for me to enjoy. Plus, we also love a strong female character, and I think Brandon Sanderson writes female characters pretty well, so I do want to jump into this before the end of the year. Hopefully, we'll see. Question number 5 is there a book that could become your new favorite? This question was very, very difficult, because I think there are a ton of books on my shelf that realistically could be like some of my favorite stuff. It's just a matter of when I read it and why I'm like enjoying it. I wish that I filled out the answers to this before I read probably my like top 3 favorite books that I've read this year, and that's Shark Heart. Shark Heart is so good, and like something similar to that I feel like would make a run for its money on my list. I decided to settle with a book that I have heard nothing but great things about, the writing specifically. I've noticed that those types of books are the ones that become my favorites. So I chose On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. What I've heard is this is like an exploration of race, love, social class, all those kinds of issues, but it's told through a series of letters. And I love stories like that, especially because that makes it so much easier to consume, and you can consume it in bite-sized chunks. I've heard that the writing is just the best part of this book, and I want to see if it's true, but I hope this one can kind of sweep me off my feet and this can become one of my new favorites. It's just a matter of what I guess I feel like reading in the time. But the last question is, have you already started making reading plans for 2025? Of course I have. Oh my gosh. Just started this channel a few months ago, so of course I've been thinking about how I want to end this year, what I want to do transitioning into next year, and whatnot. Obviously I would love to film more, but I do have like a full-time job and some pretty recurrent health issues that I've had to keep combating, so this is always just an escape for me and a place for me to get out my feelings on books, which are the one of the main sources of my joy. One of the video series that I want to do is with my fiance. I actually did get engaged and the ring is stunning. You can see it. But he is a huge fantasy book nerd and he wants me to read more old school fantasy books, and he's got this stigma that like new fantasy is not good. And I'm like, honey, come on, come here. You need to be introduced to some good stuff. So I want to make a series called like Fiancés in Fantasy. And like this entire time while we're engaged for the next like 2 years before we have our wedding, I think it would be fun maybe like every couple months if we swapped fantasy books to read. He would give me one to read and I would give him one of mine, and then we'd sit down together, film a video, and talk about what we thought in the books. And that would just be a fun way for us to connect over things too. He actually brought it up first because I think he wants to be part of this, and I think that would be really fun. That's the first idea that I have. Another thing that I would like to continue is my oddly similar synopses series, where I take 2 books with similar sounding synopses, try saying that 5 times fast, and I kind of compare the similarities and see like where they diverge, where the things are the same, like what kind of themes are similar throughout. And I had a ton of fun making that video for Hello Beautiful and Blue Sisters. I'm not much of a vlogger really right now, but it's something that I think I could grow into as 2025 comes into view. I like to do that, and I already have a working list in my brain of the next groupings that I want to do. And I will just give you a little hint. The next one is going to be a completely different genre than the one I did before, and I'm very excited about it. So the other things that I'll say for 2025 is I always do make like a reading goals list, a bookish bingo, 25 books to read in 2025. I don't know if that sounds ridiculous at this point, but I'll probably make all of those things. I think one of my overarching goals that I want is I would like to get back into reading manga. I didn't read as much manga this year. And that's just odd because last year I was totally consumed by 2 series. Like I read the entirety of Tokyo Ghoul, and I read like caught up nearly with Black Clover, and I love both of those series, but I need to find something else to kind of like dive into and enjoy. The other thing that I kind of mentioned when I was talking about Trust of the Emerald Sea is I would like to get back into fantasy. I've had the same fantasy books sitting on my shelf for years, and most of them have been untouched, which makes me really upset because I've still read a lot of fantasy. I do audiobooks for fantasy a lot of the time too, but I would like to be more mindful with my fantasy reading and enjoy that a bit more because I feel like I've been losing that side of me a little bit. The last thing that I'll say for like reading plans is I would love to also reread some of my favorite like books that I haven't read in a long time. I usually make it a goal each year to like reread 3 to 5 books I reread, but I almost enjoy rereading books more than I enjoy like finding new books because there's like some kind of like comfort and security in knowing what you're gonna get, and then since you already know what's gonna happen, you can like dissect it a bit more. It's like when you like watch a murder mystery movie and you watch it all the way through and then you're shocked in the end, but then when you go back and watch it again, you can see where all the seeds were planted. That's how I see rereading, and I love it, and then I actually like stop and be mindful and tab things, and I enjoy it. I haven't done a reread of the Giver series in like 10 years, so I think that'd be really cool to revisit, but that could be like a themed reading vlog series. But I think also doing other themed reading vlogs, like I have been loving when people are like, I read horror for a week and here's what I think. But the problem is I can only read like a book a week, really, realistically, with like my job and my other commitments. So it's hard to be dedicated to that kind of content at the same time. Things will change and I'll figure something out, but those are just kind of my initial thoughts here. And I'm just kind of blabbering to blab at this point, so I will stop yapping. Okay, that's where I think I'm gonna wrap the video up here. It's still gonna be relatively short, but I just wanted to get out some thoughts and feelings about the end of the year, transitioning into 2025, which is really crazy to think about, but I'm looking forward to making end of the year content because this will be my first year doing that. I'm looking forward to seeing what else I'll be able to read by the end of the year, but you'll see some new videos coming out soon, and thank you for spending some time with me. If you feel like it, please subscribe. Make sure to leave a comment about what book you want to read by the end of the year, and follow me on Instagram. It's the same name, Pages and Pastimes, but I'll see you in the next video. Bye!